For centuries, one mysterious cloth has both strengthened faith and ignited fierce debate. Some call it the most sacred relic in existence, others, the greatest hoax in history. But what if the Shroud of Turin isn't what we think it is? Today, we're going to uncover what science, history, and faith can agree on and try to answer one question that has haunted humanity for over 600 years. Is this truly the face of God? In the vaults of Turin Cathedral lies a piece of cloth that has puzzled scientists, believers, and skeptics alike. A faint image, a man's face, wounded, serene, seemingly crucified, stares back through the centuries. They call it the Shroud of Turin, but is it a divine imprint of Jesus Christ himself? Or an ingenious medieval forgery? It begins, as all great mysteries do, with a discovery that shouldn't have been possible. A simple length of linen, measuring about 14 feet long and 3.5 feet wide, emerged from the shadows of medieval Europe and changed the way humanity viewed faith, science, and the face of divinity itself. The story of the Shroud of Turin starts in the small French village of Liry around the year 1354. A French knight, Geoffroy de Charny, presented a strange relic to the local church, a cloth that appeared to bear the faint, ghostly image of a man who had been crucified. The priest and parishioners who gathered to see it were stunned. They saw wounds that mirrored those described in the Bible, marks on the wrists and feet, a gash on the side, and traces of what looked like blood flowing from a crown of thorns. It was, to them, not just a relic, it was a revelation. As word spread, pilgrims came from distant lands. They stood for hours to catch a glimpse of what many believed to be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ himself. But from the very beginning, controversy shadowed the shroud. The local bishop questioned its authenticity, claiming it might be nothing more than a clever painting meant to inspire devotion, or perhaps deceive the faithful. Yet no one could explain how such an image, so hauntingly lifelike, could have been created in the 14th century, long before photography or image printing even existed. The linen itself is woven in a herringbone twill pattern, a style common in the Middle East but rare in medieval Europe. The image is not painted, nor is it embedded in the fibers like ink or dye. Instead, it lies mysteriously on the surface, as though scorched by light or energy. The closer one looks, the fainter it becomes. Step back and the face reappears, emerging like a divine apparition from the fabric's texture. By the late 1500s, the shroud had found its permanent home in Turin, Italy, where it remains to this day, protected inside a sealed case and revealed only on special occasions. But its journey was far from peaceful. It survived fires, wars, and skepticism. In 1532, a devastating fire in the chapel of Chambéry nearly destroyed it. Drops of molten silver from its reliquary burned through parts of the linen, leaving behind triangular scorch marks still visible today. When nuns carefully patched the damaged areas, they did so with reverence, believing they were preserving the very cloth that once wrapped the body of Christ. And yet, the deeper one looks into its history, the more questions arise. Could this relic really have existed for nearly 2,000 years, surviving centuries of conflict and decay? Or did it emerge in the Middle Ages, crafted by human hands to stir faith and wonder? There are records and legends that suggest something like the shroud existed long before Geoffroy de Charny's discovery. Ancient texts speak of a mysterious image called the Mandelion, a cloth bearing the face of Jesus, said to have been kept in Edessa, an ancient city in modern-day Turkey. Some historians believe the Mandelion and the shroud could be one and the same, folded and hidden through centuries of secrecy before resurfacing in medieval France. But the shroud has true power isn't just in its mysterious origins, it is in the image itself. When one looks upon it, there's a strange realism that feels both physical and spiritual. The face is not a painting. It lacks brushstrokes or pigment. The wounds are perfectly consistent with Roman crucifixion practices. The bloodstains, verified by some researchers to contain human hemoglobin, are placed exactly where one would expect them from a man crucified and pierced in the side. And yet, despite all of this, the image resists explanation. Some say it was created by a burst of energy, perhaps the light of resurrection itself, searing the figure into the cloth at the moment of divine transformation. Others insist it's the work of a medieval artist whose genius has simply never been matched. Even centuries later, when high-resolution photographs were taken in 1898 by Secondopia, the world was once again shocked. On the photographic negative, the shroud's faint image transformed into a strikingly detailed positive, revealing the full, lifelike face of the man in the cloth. That moment changed everything. Suddenly, it wasn't just an ancient relic. It became the first photograph of what some called the face of God. The discovery reignited debate across the world. Was it truly miraculous? Could an unknown artist from the 1300s have somehow predicted photographic negative effects hundreds of years before photography even existed? Scientists couldn't explain it. The faithful didn't need to. For them, the shroud had already spoken, and what it said was more powerful than any proof or theory ever could be. When you first lay your eyes on it, the image seems almost invisible, faint, ghost-like, as if it's hiding within the threads themselves. But as your gaze adjusts, something extraordinary begins to appear: a face, eyes closed, a beard, long hair parted down the middle. The expression is calm, yet it carries the unmistakable signs of agony, bruises, swelling, blood flowing from the forehead. This isn't just any image. It's a portrait of suffering, a human imprint of pain and peace at the same time. The man on the shroud is unlike any figure from art or legend. He bears the physical marks of crucifixion exactly as described in the New Testament. There are bloodstains on the wrists, not the palms, matching the Roman method of crucifixion, which would have driven nails through the wrists to support body weight. Across the forehead, a cluster of tiny wounds, consistent with a crown made of sharp thorns. The side of the torso is pierced, as if by a spear. Around the back and shoulders, faint marks that look eerily like scourge wounds, possibly from a Roman flagrum, a whip tipped with metal. Every detail aligns with the story of Christ's passion. And yet, this image wasn't painted. It wasn't drawn. Scientists who have examined it for decades still struggle to explain how it exists at all. Under magnification, the fibers of the linen show no trace of pigment, no brushstrokes, no dye soaking into the threads. The coloration only affects the topmost fibers, just a few microns deep, as if the image was lightly burned onto the surface by some burst of heat or light. No known artistic technique, not even today, can replicate this with complete accuracy. This is where the mystery deepens. Some researchers believe the shroud captures not just a likeness, but an actual physical imprint, a negative image formed by a radiant burst of energy at the moment of resurrection. When the first photographic negative of the shroud was taken by Secondopia in 1898, the discovery stunned the world. What appeared faint and unclear to the naked eye transformed into an astonishingly detailed positive image on the photographic plate. The features of the man became vivid: eyes, nose, mouth, beard. Even strands of hair could be seen with clarity never before imagined. For the first time in history, people claimed they were looking directly into the face of Jesus Christ. Artists, historians, and skeptics have all studied this face for centuries. Its symmetry, proportions, and structure are unlike most medieval depictions of Christ. It doesn't match the artistic styles of the 14th century, when the shroud first appeared in records. Instead, the man's face resembles the ancient Eastern icons, a Semitic, Middle Eastern appearance, long before Western European artists reimagined Jesus with lighter features. Even forensic experts have noted that the image carries a natural realism, showing three-dimensional depth, bruising, and swelling patterns consistent with real human trauma. But what strikes most people isn't the science, it's the emotion. The face on the shroud seems alive in its stillness. There's suffering in the features, but also serenity, as if the man had endured unspeakable pain and yet found peace in his final moments. For believers, it's more than evidence, it's an encounter. They see the very moment of sacrifice, the imprint of divinity on the material world. Yet for skeptics, the face is a puzzle that refuses to fit into any logical box. If it's a painting, how was it made without pigment? If it's a scorch, what caused it? If it's a photographic negative, who could have created such an image centuries before cameras were invented? Even the way the blood appears, real human blood according to some tests, makes the mystery deeper. The stains are anatomically perfect, matching gravity flow and coagulation patterns that align with a body lying in burial position. No medieval artist could have understood such physiological precision. And still, every theory seems to raise more questions than answers. Some say the shroud is the result of a natural chemical reaction, gases released by a decomposing body that somehow discolored the linen. Others argue it's a miraculous phenomenon, a supernatural event imprinted at the very moment of resurrection, an explosion of divine energy leaving its trace on the cloth. The eyes seem to tell a story too. Though closed, some claim faint objects can be seen, coin-like shapes over the eyelids, possibly ancient Roman lepta used in Jewish burials of the 1st century. When digital enhancement was applied, faint letters and patterns resembling inscriptions appeared on these shapes, though skeptics debate their authenticity. Whether illusion or evidence, every new discovery seems to suggest that the shroud may indeed have roots far older than anyone imagined. Generations have stared at that face, scientists in white coats, priests in silent prayer, and pilgrims moved to tears. Each person sees something different. Some see evidence of faith. Others see the perfect mystery, one that refuses to be solved. The face on the cloth has become more than an image. It's a mirror of human belief, reflecting back whatever one chooses to find within it. From the moment the Shroud of Turin first caught the world's attention, scientists have been both fascinated and frustrated by it. For centuries, it stood as a challenge, a question wrapped in linen. When photography, chemistry, and modern testing finally entered the picture, researchers believed the time had come to solve the mystery once and for all. But the more they studied it, the more elusive the truth became. In 1898, the world saw the shroud in a new light, literally. When Secondo Pia took the first ever photograph of the shroud, he expected nothing more than a clearer view of the faint image. What developed in his darkroom shocked him to his core. On the photographic negative, the image appeared with stunning clarity, a detailed, lifelike face, hands, and body, as though he had captured the world's first ancient photograph. That revelation turned the shroud from a relic of faith into a global scientific phenomenon. It was no longer just an artifact of devotion. It became a puzzle for the most advanced minds on Earth. As the 20th century progressed, teams of experts in physics, biology, and chemistry began their investigations. The most famous of them all, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, or STURP, formed in 1978. Over 5 days, more than 30 American scientists examined the relic using X-rays, ultraviolet light, infrared imaging, and microscopic analysis. Their mission was simple: determine how the image was formed. They expected to find pigments, paint, or some trace of an artist's hand. Instead, they found none. The image, they discovered, was not painted, burned, or dyed. It contained no brushstrokes, no color that penetrated the fibers, and no signs of any known artistic technique. What they found defied explanation. The image seemed to rest only on the very top fibers of the linen, so thin that removing just a layer or two of cellulose would make it vanish. The intensity of the coloration was directly proportional to the distance between the cloth and the body, suggesting the image might have been formed by some kind of radiation or light source that encoded three-dimensional information. When scientists processed the image through a NASA image analyzer, it produced a perfect 3D relief, something impossible for any ordinary painting or print. Whatever had created it, it wasn't something human hands could easily reproduce. But the most controversial test came a decade later, in 1988, when 3 laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Tucson were granted permission to perform radiocarbon dating on a small piece of the linen. This was the test that many hoped would end the debate forever. Tiny samples were cut from a corner of the shroud, and after months of careful testing, the results seemed clear. The cloth dated between 1260 and 1390 AD, precisely when the shroud first appeared in historical records. The world's headlines declared the mystery solved. The shroud, they said, was a medieval forgery? But not everyone accepted the results so easily. Almost immediately, questions arose about the accuracy of the sample itself. Critics pointed out that the tested corner might not have been original linen at all. That section, they argued, had been heavily handled and possibly repaired after the fire of 1532. Textile experts later discovered microscopic differences in the weave, suggesting that threads from the damaged area had been rewoven with newer material to reinforce the cloth. If that was true, the radiocarbon dating might have tested the repairs, not the ancient fabric itself. Subsequent studies began to challenge the 1988 results. Chemical analyses detected traces of cotton fibers and dye in the tested sample, substances not found elsewhere on the shroud. Other researchers noted that the fabric had been exposed to centuries of smoke, heat, and contaminants, all of which could have skewed the carbon-14 readings. Even one of the original lab scientists admitted years later that the data didn't fully align, hinting that the process might have been more complex than initially thought. Meanwhile, new technologies continued to push the investigation further. Spectroscopic analysis, pollen studies, and forensic research all began to tell a story that didn't fit the medieval theory. Pollen grains found on the shroud matched species native to the Middle East, particularly the regions around Jerusalem, and some of them dated back long before the 14th century. Traces of limestone dust on the linen were chemically identical to samples found near ancient tombs in Jerusalem, not Europe. Modern scientists using ultraviolet light also discovered subtle features invisible to the naked eye, bruising around the face, and shoulders and blood patterns that fluoresced in a way consistent with human hemoglobin. Forensic pathologists identified blood types and flow directions that matched an upright, crucified body. To many researchers, this wasn't the work of a forger, it was the imprint of an actual human being. Even today, no experiment has been able to replicate the image exactly as it appears on the shroud. Attempts using heat, radiation, and chemical reactions have all fallen short. Some produce partial results, but none match the delicate precision of the original. Every scientific breakthrough only seems to deepen the enigma. Was it a natural phenomenon beyond our current understanding? Or something that defies the limits of science itself? For millions of believers around the world, the Shroud of Turin isn't just a piece of cloth. It's a sacred encounter with the divine. To them, it represents the most profound moment in human history, the suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. When they stand before the shroud, they don't see a mystery of science or a challenge for historians. They see the imprint of love, sacrifice, and salvation. The faint outline of that face, the marks of pain, the trace of blood, all become symbols of faith made visible. From the moment it appeared in Liry, France in the 14th century, the shroud became a focal point for devotion. Pilgrims traveled great distances to see it, kneeling in silence as they gazed upon the fragile linen. They believed they were standing in the presence of something holy, a relic that connected heaven and earth. For them, no debate about authenticity could overshadow the spiritual power it carried. The image spoke directly to the heart, a reflection of Christ's final moments captured not by human hands but by a divine act beyond comprehension. The Catholic Church, careful and cautious, has never officially declared the shroud as the genuine burial cloth of Jesus, yet it has always recognized its importance as an instrument of faith. Popes across centuries have prayed before it, blessed it, and called it a mirror of the gospel. Pope John Paul II described it as a provocative sign that challenges modern man's skepticism, while Pope Benedict XVI called it an icon written in blood. And when Pope Francis viewed it, he described the experience as looking upon the face of suffering love. For believers, these moments reinforce what no scientific test can measure, the shroud's ability to inspire belief. They see it as evidence that faith and reason can coexist, even if they don't always agree. The image becomes more than just a relic. It becomes a message. It reminds the faithful that the story of Christ's passion wasn't just about death, but about endurance, forgiveness, and hope. Every mark on that linen is seen as a silent sermon, a visual testament to the price of redemption. Throughout history, the shroud has also played a powerful role during times of crisis. When plagues swept across Europe, processions were held with the shroud displayed as a sign of divine mercy. During wars and uncertainty, people sought its presence for protection and comfort. The shroud became more than an object of veneration. it became a symbol of endurance, much like the faith it represents. Even in the modern age, when science seeks evidence and faith demands none, the shroud continues to captivate hearts. Millions still travel to Turin whenever it's displayed publicly, often breaking into tears as they see the image revealed under soft light. Some describe the experience as overwhelming, as if the linen carries a silent energy that speaks directly to the soul. To them, no laboratory test can diminish what they feel, the presence of something far greater than human understanding. The emotional power of the shroud transcends religion too. Even those outside Christianity find themselves moved by its haunting serenity. The image seems to capture something universally human, the struggle between suffering and peace, mortality and transcendence. It reflects not just the story of one man, but the story of all humanity searching for meaning in pain. In Christian theology, the shroud stands as a physical manifestation of what the resurrection signifies. Believers point to the possibility that if the image truly formed at the moment of resurrection, then the shroud is the only physical trace of that miracle, the single material witness to a divine event. It becomes the bridge between faith and evidence, between belief and mystery. To look upon it is to confront a paradox, a scientific enigma that can only be understood through faith. For some, it asks the proof they've always needed, a sign that God left behind a mark to remind humanity of his presence. For others, it's not about proof at all. The shroud doesn't need to be authenticated to inspire devotion. It stands as a silent reminder that belief doesn't always require explanation, and that the most powerful truths often live beyond the reach of reason. Every wrinkle, every shadow, every faint detail on the shroud carries with it centuries of prayer, hope, and reverence. Generations have looked upon it and found strength in its mystery. Whether they see it as the burial cloth of Christ or a sacred symbol of faith, the effect is the same. Hearts are moved, spirits are lifted, and the invisible becomes tangible. As the centuries rolled forward, science kept trying to close the case, but each new discovery only seemed to open more doors. When technology advanced, the Shroud of Turin became one of the most analyzed artifacts in human history. From digital imaging to particle physics, researchers have thrown everything at it, yet the mystery remains untouched at its core. And while some claim science is closing in on an answer, others believe the more we learn, the further we drift from understanding how such an image could even exist. The Shroud's story took a dramatic turn with the rise of digital technology. In the 1970s, when NASA's engineers used a device called the VP8 image analyzer to study the linen, they expected nothing unusual. This machine was designed to read brightness levels in photos and convert them into three-dimensional data. When they fed the Shroud's image into it, what appeared was nothing short of astonishing, a perfectly proportioned, three-dimensional relief of a human body. Ordinary photographs don't produce such results, but the Shroud did. The image contained precise spatial information, as if it were created by a real body lying beneath the fabric. No medieval artist could have achieved that. It was as if the linen had somehow recorded depth, height, and dimension, not just an image, but an imprint of existence itself. Modern forensic experts have joined the conversation, analyzing the wounds, blood patterns, and anatomy visible on the Shroud. Their findings often align with medical knowledge of crucifixion. The blood flow from the wrists and feet follows natural gravity patterns, consistent with someone nailed to a cross. The wound on the side corresponds to the angle of a Roman spear thrust upward into the ribcage. Even the marks across the shoulders match what one might expect from carrying a heavy wooden beam. These details are so precise that some forensic pathologists have called the Shroud the most anatomically accurate depiction of crucifixion ever known. Still, skeptics refuse to accept the supernatural explanation. Some have proposed that the image was created by a form of medieval photography, perhaps a protophotographic process using light-sensitive chemicals in a corpse. This camera obscura theory suggests that the Shroud could be the earliest experiment in photography, centuries before its invention. But even this explanation falters when faced with the linen's microscopic characteristics. The image does not penetrate the threads. It rests on the surface at a molecular level without chemical residues or carbon burns. No known photographic or artistic process has been able to replicate that effect with total accuracy. Then came the era of computer imaging and spectral analysis. Scientists began scanning the shroud in high resolution, revealing intricate details unseen by the naked eye. They found faint traces of plant pollen species native not to Europe, but to the regions around Jerusalem. Some pollen grains matched flowers that bloom only in the spring around the time of Passover. Others detected subtle traces of limestone dust identical to the kind found in ancient tombs near the city. These discoveries hinted that the shroud may have indeed spent time in the Middle East long before it reached Europe. Even more recently, researchers have explored the theory that the image could have been created by a burst of radiant energy, an ultraviolet light or radiation flash that scorched the linen at a molecular level. In experiments using laser pulses and corona discharges, scientists have been able to reproduce parts of the shroud's coloration, but only on small samples and under conditions requiring technology that didn't exist until the modern age. The energy needed to imprint such an image on an entire cloth would have to be immense, far greater than any natural source known to science. This has led some to speculate that if the shroud really was formed in a single instantaneous burst of energy, it might reflect something beyond our understanding, perhaps even the moment of resurrection itself. Meanwhile, skeptics propose simpler explanations: a clever medieval artist using powdered pigments, or a contact transfer created by laying a painted surface against cloth. But each of these theories breaks down under scrutiny. The shroud's image lacks any directionality, no brushstrokes, no streaks, no sign of contact pressure. The faint yellowing of the fibers appears more like a heat reaction than a pigment application. Whatever created the image, it wasn't made by hand. The deeper modern science digs, the stranger the evidence becomes. Even advanced scanning electron microscopes, chemical spectroscopy, and radiation studies can't fully explain the shroud's origin. Some physicists believe the image could be the result of an unknown form of energy release, possibly a burst of electromagnetic radiation that occurred when the body beneath the cloth disappeared. Others argue it could be the product of a still undiscovered natural process involving gases and light. And yet, every theory, no matter how convincing, leaves a gap that no amount of data can fill. Today, high-tech 3D models allow us to see the man of the shroud in lifelike detail. We can trace every wound, measure every fold, and even reconstruct his face with modern software. And while this technology brings us closer than ever to seeing the shroud's realism, it also deepens the mystery. The more clearly we see the image, the more impossible it seems that such a perfect and delicate imprint could appear by accident or by human art. For more than 6 centuries, the Shroud of Turin has stood at the crossroads between belief and doubt. It is both a sacred relic and a scientific riddle, a piece of cloth that seems to whisper 2 stories at once, one of faith and one of mystery. And yet, even after decades of testing, analysis, and debate, one question continues to echo through time: is it authentic or is it a hoax? Every theory that tries to solve the mystery seems to create another, and every answer raises even deeper doubts. When the 1988 Radiocarbon dating results declared the shroud a medieval forgery, many thought the discussion was finally over. But in the years that followed, cracks began to appear in that conclusion. The test, which dated the fabric to between 1260 and 1390 AD, was based on a small sample cut from the cloth's edge, an area now believed to have been contaminated and possibly rewoven after fire damage in the 1500s. Chemical analyses later revealed that the tested corner contained cotton fibers and dye not found in the rest of the linen. If that section wasn't part of the original cloth, the date might have been misleading. That revelation reopened the case, reigniting a global debate between believers, skeptics, and scientists who refuse to accept easy answers. For those who see the shroud as authentic, the evidence feels overwhelming. The wounds correspond perfectly to Roman crucifixion methods, right down to the placement of nails through the wrists instead of the palms. The bloodstains match the flow of a real human body under gravity. Pollen grains found on the linen point toward plants native to the Holy Land, not Europe. And the image itself, faint, delicate, impossible to replicate, defies all known artistic or chemical processes. The believers argue that no forger in the 14th century could have created something so anatomically precise, so scientifically complex, and so resistant to explanation. To them, the shroud is not proof that God exists, but proof that faith can leave a trace in the physical world. Skeptics, however, tell a different story. They see the shroud as a powerful illusion, perhaps crafted by a talented medieval artist or monk seeking to inspire devotion or draw pilgrims to a church. They point to historical records of relic forgeries that flourished in medieval Europe, pieces of the true cross, nails of crucifixion, bones of saints, all claimed to be authentic, all designed to strengthen faith through tangible symbols. To skeptics, the shroud fits that same pattern, a masterpiece of religious artistry meant to evoke wonder, not deception. The question, they say, isn't whether it's miraculous, but whether it's human genius mistaken for divine truth. The debate is far from just academic. It touches something deeper, the human need to believe. If the shroud is genuine, it might be the closest thing we have to a physical trace of Jesus Christ, a snapshot of the moment between death and resurrection. But if it's not, it is still one of the most extraordinary artifacts in human history, a creation so perfect that it continues to outsmart the very science that tries to expose it. That paradox keeps both sides searching, unwilling to let the mystery rest. Modern technology has made the mystery even more complex. New studies using spectroscopy, infrared imaging, and particle physics suggest that the image could have been created by an unknown form of radiant energy, possibly ultraviolet light far stronger than any natural source. Others argue the image was caused by chemical reactions between bodily gases and the linen S carbohydrate layer. But each theory, while plausible in part, fails to explain every detail. The shroud refuses to fit neatly into any single explanation, as though it was designed to sit forever between the realms of the physical and the divine. Religious believers often say that the shroud's greatest proof lies not in the laboratory, but in its impact. It has inspired millions to reflect on the meaning of faith, suffering, and sacrifice. For many, standing before the shroud is not about proving anything. It's about feeling something, a sense of connection to a moment that transcends history. Scientists, on the other hand, continue to see it as one of the greatest unsolved puzzles of all time. To them, every unanswered question is an invitation to keep searching, to push the boundaries of what we know about light, matter, and life itself. And so, the shroud continues to exist in that delicate space between doubt and belief. Historians trace its path through time. Scientists test its fibers and image formation, theologians meditate on its spiritual meaning, yet no one can claim certainty. The linen resists explanation as though it was never meant to give one. The face on the shroud looks back at us across centuries, silent but hauntingly alive, asking the same question we've been asking all along, a question that may never have a definitive answer, yet one that refuses to fade from the human heart. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has stood suspended between two worlds, faith and science, heaven and earth, mystery and evidence. It is more than a relic. It is a reflection of humanity's eternal search for truth. Every fiber of its linen carries not just the faint image of a man, but the imprint of questions that have shaped generations. Is it the burial cloth of Christ, preserved through time by divine will? Or is it the work of human hands, created with skill so extraordinary that even modern science cannot fully explain it? Despite decades of tests, debates, and discoveries, the shroud refuses to give up its secrets. Radiocarbon dating said one thing, but chemistry, forensics, and history hint at another. It exists as both proof and paradox, authentic to those who believe and confounding to those who doubt. And maybe that's the real reason it endures. The shroud doesn't just challenge our understanding of the past. It challenges the limits of what we believe is possible. When people stand before it, whether in the quiet of a cathedral or through the lens of a high-resolution scan, something profound happens. They don't just see an ancient piece of cloth, they feel a presence, a connection that transcends time and explanation. The image of that wounded face, serene yet powerful, continues to stir the hearts of millions, speaking in silence to believers and skeptics alike. Perhaps the shroud's greatest mystery is not how it was made, but why it continues to matter. It reminds us that faith is not the absence of proof, and science is not the enemy of wonder. Somewhere between the threads of linen and the questions it raises lies the essence of being human, our unending desire to seek, to question, and to believe. Whether it is the true face of God or the most remarkable enigma in history, the Shroud of Turin remains what it has always been. A mirror reflecting both our doubts and our faith, inviting each of us to look closer and to decide for ourselves what we see staring back.